Hi, I'm James Kraus with Pear Tree Communications, and today we're talking about value engineering, joined by Clark Neft, who's the president of Barth Industries, Rebecca Morgan, who is with Fulcrum Consulting, and Trey Roeder with Roeder Consulting. First, Clark, could you just help us understand what value engineering is from Barth's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Value engineering being an old term, we've embraced it at Barth really to help our customers achieve their objectives. And as a contract manufacturer, most often it's, how can we manufacture their product, their parts at the lowest cost. But what generally is driving that is meeting a bigger objective: warranty, unexpected downtime, uh, you know, ease of installation on the site. There's a lot of things that drive it, but for us, value engineering is a process that starts with early involvement, goes throughout a project or a program, and then continues on with the lessons learned. So we're finding that embracing this old thought of value engineering is refreshing to many of our customers.
Trey Roeder, maybe you could just respond and let us know a little bit how your expertise fit into what Clark is talking about.
Yeah, great. Thank you. First, thank you for welcoming me and inviting me to be part of this conversation today. Project management is also about helping organizations achieve their objectives. So the goal that we're striving for, whether you call it value engineering or project management or something else, is similar. We advocate a balanced approach with project management, and in that balanced approach there's three core skills that the project manager would need to have. The first are those technical project management skills, which is managing the timeline, managing the budget, writing documents, and so on. The second is business acumen, so consistent with the value engineering philosophy, always knowing what you're trying to do and what the business objectives are. And then the third core set of skills are interpersonal skills. This work is not always a straight line. Things change. Timelines are missed. Vendors have problems with their supply chain where they don't get you supplies when you think you will. So it's the ability to manage those interpersonal skills and those disruptions that enable projects to succeed or not.
Great. And Rebecca, could you kind of fill us in on what your part in this is?
Sure, thank you for inviting me. When we work with manufacturers, it's all about how do they provide more value to their customer. The last place you want to be is a commodity. The last thing you want is for people to think that your product is no different from anyone else's. Or if you have a price premium, you want people to believe that that price premium is money well spent. It's well worth it. So the question becomes, how do you provide that value to the market so that they see you as distinct and they see you as more valuable? And in my experience, companies that reliably, predictably are able to deliver on time, deliver the value that the customer has requested, whatever form or shape that may take, those are companies that their market is willing to pay to do business with. So we focus on understanding what the customer values, and then how do we best provide that in processes that are reliable and predictable, so not every time is about reinventing the wheel, that we can do this each and every time.
So, Rebecca, I'm glad that you kind of came back to the word value, because I think that when we think about the word value, often cost kind of comes into play. Is this really about cost? And Clark, maybe I'll throw that over to you, and then anyone else can chime in as well. Just the question being, Clark, is this all about cost?
No, it's not all about cost. I'll give you an example. One of our customers makes transmissions, and their objective is to eliminate warranty. And the number one cause of warranty is noise, which is often a very subjective problem in the field. And so what we did is we backed it up to the very beginning of and it's a mature product. So we put a team together, involved the quality engineer from our customers, the design engineers from our customers, the foundry, as well as our manufacturing and engineering project management team. And over the course of a year or so, we optimized everything to basically tighten up all the processes. We changed the casting designs, optimized it, fixturing, the core boxes, patterns, as well as how the part was dimensioned and how it was actually machined. And the outcome is going to be a much more controlled process, which will significantly reduce the possibility of noise warranty for this customer's transmission. The byproduct of that is that we will have less scrap, less time to machine the part, less secondary operations, less porosity issues with castings, etc. And so all the byproducts that support reducing warranty are very significant. So, yeah, the value is more than just the cost.
Mm-hmm. Trey, just in terms of cost being a factor, I put the question to Clark. Is this a broader discussion than cost for you as well?
Absolutely. Project managers often refer to something they call the triple constraint. Now, after a number of years of working with different clients, we found that the triple constraint is defined a little bit differently depending on the client. But it's often, is the project done on time? Is the project done on budget? And is the project done within the appropriate scope? Depending on your goals with the project, cost may be very important, or it may be more important to get it done on time. For some situations, you might be willing to spend a little bit more, but get that project completed, because when you look at the total cost, that could in fact drive a lower total cost in the operation. So in response to your question, and I think this is what Clark and his organization is particularly good at as well, the specific cost of a manufacturing item or one process or one project needs to be put in the context of overall total cost and, more importantly, the overall total value that's being delivered.
Okay. And I think, Rebecca, you had talked before about really kind of defining success. Is that an important factor here as well? Really kind of working with a manufacturer to figure out what exactly defines a successful product or a successful place in the marketplace.
Well, all I can say is if you don't define success, the old any road will get you there or no road will get you there. We have to really understand what we're trying to accomplish. And in the case of some product designs, let's say that the company is in consumer goods industry and they want to follow a postponement strategy. That means the design may well need to have modularity built in. You may need to have a strategy to minimize parts, so go through a parts rationalization process so that you can support a postponement strategy which theoretically can reduce or eliminate finished good inventory and create the capability to deliver almost immediately mass customized products. But that has to, if you don't design for that strategy is meaningless. You're not going to be able to implement it in any real way that brings value. You can call what you do postponement, but you won't really be doing that. So it's important that we understand, are we trying to reduce finished goods inventory? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to reduce the number of parts? Are we trying to reduce the complexity of manufacturing? If we don't understand those goals, again, how can we say that something was done well or it wasn't done well? So I think for all three of us, the real focus is on understanding what success looks like and then what is the best path to get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Clark, I know you've talked before about how really kind of getting involved with a project earlier is really crucial to success. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that in relationship to what Rebecca just spoke about.
Absolutely. Trey talked about the triple constraint of quality and cost and schedule. And most commonly, our customers and traditionally people are thinking, go and get through bids, give it to somebody, and that'll get me the lowest cost. What we propose is that we're involved very early. In fact, we are quite often with design engineers that don't work for manufacturing companies. And so, as we develop a partnership and get involved early, we actually can shape the product so that it's manufacturable, so it meets all the objectives that they want to do, and ultimately, as Trey mentioned, reduces the total life cycle of project costs from the design phase forward. So early involvement is absolutely critical. We do it with our partners on a regular basis. With new clients, we try to do it starting with the proposal phase. And then what's really exciting is just continuing the process from one project or product to the next and really engaging all those lessons learned. So early involvement is really one of the keys to success.
If I might add on to those comments, there's a more traditional way of thinking is that there's a strategic planning process that happens in isolation, and then that leads to a set of criterion, a description for some project that needs to happen, and then that gets passed over the wall to some group that then executes against that. And that is not the best way to do things. And in the modern organization, in the organization that's truly successful, we're seeing that all those are connected. The people who are the people who are engineering and doing the project should be part of that strategic planning, should be part of putting together the specifications of what the project is. And the people who are doing the planning and the project specs should understand what can and can't be done from a manufacturing standpoint. And this interrelationship here and this discussion and dialogue is where really true innovation can happen and tremendous value can be delivered versus the more traditional kind of throw it over the fence from one group to the next way of thinking.
Well, Trey, one of the things that we work together on in the project management process you can speak to is really going on and getting that expert involved throughout the process. And that expert could be somebody like Rebecca or yourself or whatever. And in the case of our company, we believe we're the experts in manufacturing. And that's, again, with early involvement. And I think it's just as it should be, is promoted as a normal part of a good program project management process.
Agreed.
And I would add that for most of our companies that we work with, the market defines the price. Cost plus pricing is pretty dead. So when the market defines the price, then it falls on design and engineering and manufacturing to say, can we reach a target cost that provides a fair margin for all involved? Do we have the capability of designing a product that can be sourced and manufactured and supported at that target cost? So I think all of us understand that what Trey described as toss it over the wall simply doesn't work. Now, there are still some companies that do that. 2008 and a few years after that cleared out a lot of those, but there are still some that remain. But I think the fundamental question is, will they still remain, and do they meet your needs as the customer? Can a company with that environment meet your needs long term? So I think it's important, regardless of the industry you're in, that you look at your suppliers and say, are they going to be able to support us long term in managing our cost structure, but also helping us be more competitive? If your suppliers don't enhance your competitive advantage, you've lost a real opportunity. So in working with a company like Clark's or with Trey's, part of what they can bring to bear is they can increase the competitive advantage of their customers by the services they bring.
Well, in relationship to that, and I think you're touching on this a little bit. Are there trends either today or coming down the pike that are driving this approach? the world's always evolving and changing, and what worked yesterday isn't working today. Can we talk a little bit about more about what kind of trends are driving this?
Well, I'll speak to that first. The world is very global, very competitive now. The internet, travel, etc., has just changed the entire business model. I still am one of those people that think you need to have revenue and profits to have a good business model, but competition can come from anywhere. And when you look at Clark's business, there are tons of places where you can go on the internet and people put out a drawing for bid all over the world. And believe me, that is very much a cost-based environment. And I don't think Clark wants to play in that market because the value may not be, the value he can bring is going to be cheapened there. But that kind of market does change who we want to do business with. I don't think any of the three of us want to do business with the guy who's going to switch suppliers for a penny. Because that penny, while it may be a lot of money over time, may miss the entire point. I think it was Trey earlier that talked about the total cost of ownership. So the globalization has really changed the competitive environment, and it's required strategic evaluations in the part of most businesses. Do we want to play in that game? Now, Clark's business competes internationally, absolutely. But do they want to compete in that world where there's drawings out on the internet and you go in and it's like an eBay reverse auction where you're trying to get it, as cheap as you can? When we talk about value and we talk about long-term value, the price of what you pay for is typically a drop in the bucket. So all of those kinds of changes have really created strategic changes, created changes in who do you want to do business with. There's that strategic divide of do you want to have partnerships with suppliers, and that should have some meaning when we use the word partnership, or are you going to change suppliers every time you go out and bid? So there's kind of a dichotomy in the market of those businesses that want to move along to the lowest bid continually and they'll go anywhere to get it, and those that recognize the value of partnerships that enhance competitive advantage over time. For me, that's the biggest change that I've seen happening over the last decade or two, and I think it's really picking up speed at this point.
Trey or Clark, did you want to chime in on any trends, changes for the future?
Well, I think one of the trends that we're seeing all over the world is that more and more things are being reshored, and more manufacturers that are global are trying to do it at least on the continent where the work is being done. And to remain competitive and making the profits that they need in the local market, they really need to focus on all the things that we're talking about, including more and more automation, this whole partnership idea, driving towards that common cost goals or objectives. And even though it's global, we are seeing that reshoring trend, and in this case, U.S. companies need to find a way to be competitive with the rest of the world. And what we're talking about is the way to get there.
And for project management, your question was what's driving this change and what might the future look like? So in the world of project management, it's very clear that what is driving the change towards a balanced approach is that what we did before didn't work. According to most statistics, only about 1/3 of projects succeed to be on time, on scope, within budget. And one of the primary causes for that is because historically the project management profession has focused only on that technical side of managing projects. So what's the future? Indeed, what are we seeing happening today? Project management and the discipline of getting work done within organizations needs to not only have that technical approach, but always needs to have an eye on the business acumen, this cost of ownership, this big picture we're talking about, and needs to be focused on the relationships, the interpersonal skills, the ability to get through barriers, the ability to figure it out when there's an obstacle put in front of you, rather than going back to some arbitrary project plan and saying, well, it's not going to work. We need to figure it out. And that's what the project management profession is going to be called on to do.
Are there any like technological changes that that have occurred in manufacturing or are occurring right now and are changing the future of how manufacturing happens that come into play? We think about how you know, software and you know, communication has changed in the last 10 years. Are some of those huge sweeping changes happening in manufacturing?
Well, Rebecca, I'd like to hear your perspective on that, if you would.
I would say that there are two kinds of companies, those that believe technology answers everything and they look to technology first, and those who look at technology as a support mechanism and they understand that we need to have a good process before we automate it, that timely, visible data doesn't necessarily need to go through a computer somewhere, and that we automate only in support of a stable process. So there's kind of two sides to looking at automation, and I would certainly be the last to say that process automation is a bad thing, but I would say that automating a bad process is a bad thing. So there has to be some strategic view as to how automation really fits in to what we're doing. I think most companies are going with automation, but I'm not sure that it's always the wise decision. Labor costs are easy to point out on a P&L, so it's easy to say this machine is going to get rid of 10 people and say it's going to pay for itself in so many months or so many years. But the real value in automation is less in the people that it may replace and much more in the consistency. If there's a dangerous process, we'd much rather it be machine controlled, machine automated than have people involved in it. There are real roles for automation, but replacing labor is not the primary, or should not be the primary objective of most of it.
Well, I completely agree with Rebecca's assessment. I have to confess, I'm an automation guy, so I love automation, but completely agree with Rebecca. I see the trend in having the U.S. be more and more productive, or being very productive, I should say, is automation applied correctly, and completely in line with what Rebecca said. In the case of our customers, we try to be able to configure their products to order, to pull their orders through it very quickly. Automation is often the key, but it doesn't replace the skilled human being ever in a good process. So it's a good combination of all of those things.
Is the application of technology, you know, is it always about automation, or is it about more precision? Is it about being able to, you know, or are there technological changes that are happening in the world that are changing what kinds of products need to be actually manufactured?
In the case that I mentioned earlier about making a transmission, it was all of the above. It was having a solid, optimized design. It was making the castings in a controlled way. It was, you know, automating the machining technologies, the toolings, and everything else. But at the end of the day, you have an operator or a machinist that is making sure that the processes are controlled as described, doing their work. And it all comes back to understanding that strategy. What's the outcome? Which in this case was no warranty, no customer complaints, everything delivered on time with no internal defects. So, but it took all of those. Call it a balanced approach. Call it a good blend of process people and automation. That's what it is. It takes all of those skills and strategies.
Well, and I would say that there's a couple of ways to look at automation. One is process automation, but I'm seeing the use of technology a lot in shops like Barth, but I'm particularly thinking of some tool and die shops that I've worked with now, where the specialist workers have iPads, and they put QR codes on the sides of the equipment. So I can scan that and immediately see the maintenance manual. I can immediately see jobs and see technical information. So they're using iPads and other kinds of technologies to support the worker in having the information they need at the time they need it. So there's automation equipment to make pieces parts faster or more precise, but there's also technology being used to make people more productive from the standpoint of information, of measurements, etc., that makes it right here, right now.
I guess one of the things that kind of comes into play, and this is a question for you, Clark, and I think that it'll lead to a broader discussion, but Barth has turned 100 years old this year. That history of manufacturing, how does that come into play into this whole discussion?
Barth being 100 years old is a great story from evolving from a tool and die shop to a company that can make complete production machines and everything that supports it. We've had to embrace different technologies over the years, from manual machines to NC to CNC to automation in different forms, and it's just a continual learning process of our own internal value engineering. How are we adding value to our customers in all those ways? So it's we look back 100 years as we are this year. It's just remarkable how the world has changed in the last 100 years, last 10 years.
So, I guess maybe Rebecca or Trey, if you might be able to comment on how companies are evolving, manufacturers are evolving in order to meet some of these trends. There are new trends, there are new technologies, but then you also have a lot of expertise out there and a lot of history in manufacturing.
I've had my consulting company for 24 years now, and I was in industry for 14 years before that. I've gone from making macaroni and cheese for Stouffer's to making airplane parts for TRW, and I found more similarities than differences there. The scientists are different, the government agency is different, but the choreography required of getting in, understanding value, understanding what the market will pay for and what it won't, understanding what you need, when, how to process it, what is good, what is bad, what's repeatable, what's not repeatable, and getting it to the customer on time. All that grand choreography is the same in virtually every manufacturing business. Not the details of it, but rather the concept of it. So all manufacturing is kind of evolving along what I'm going to call a wide path to accommodate the distinctions in various industries, but they're all kind of moving the same direction. And that is primarily this concept of value, helping your customer have competitive advantage in the case of the industrial world, or in the case of the consumer world, providing value that there is a market for, whether that's health food or clothes from the Gap or whatever. There's a market. You need to understand that market and provide what that market will pay for. The details of how that's done are certainly evolving. Whether you're talking about types of transportation, containerization, and now everybody sees trains with containers on them, and multimodal shipments is a common way of moving things. That wasn't necessarily the case not that many years ago. So there's a lot of changes affecting every business, but those changes, I think, are all guided by the same factors of continuous improvement, being creative, and not being afraid to go back and say, they were smarter 20 years ago in this area. Let's go back and see how we can learn from that, and maybe even just do it that same way because it turned out better.
Well, I'd like to congratulate Barth on 100 years and Rebecca on 24 years. Rotor Consulting has started in 2001, so I guess that makes us the junior firm here today with only 13 years in business. There's something interesting that technology has done to project management, and I think it ties in very nicely to this broader conversation that we're having. So in project management, there's many software tools now. Some of them are desktop, some of them are web-enabled. They have all kinds of levels of complexity. These software tools are intended to be used to manage projects. What this has done is, for many organizations, it's given them a false sense of certainty on their projects. Because you can type into this tool, it'll take 3.2 hours to do this. And it'll take 0.18 of a resource to get it done. And then it rolls up into these plans and so on, and you feel like it creates an accuracy that's not reflective of the real world. So what I'm hearing Clark and Rebecca talk about is the smart application of technology and the overlay of technology on top of a process that makes sense and people who have experience. Because that's where work truly gets done. The technology helps, but the technology isn't, at least in project management, which is the field I'm most familiar with, that technology isn't going to do the project for us. You still need an individual who has experience, who knows what they're doing to get the work done.
I guess in terms of just maybe some final thoughts, I mean, if I can frame that with maybe if this is an opportunity to speak to any of the manufacturing companies or product companies out there, is there something that that maybe they tend to do now that maybe they could do differently? Just as a sort of final parting thought of how we kind of wrap this up. Clark?
Just simply, have a strategy, get your expert partners involved early, and work closely to a common goal.
Great. Rebecca, any final thoughts?
Sure. Every company can do things differently and better. There is no perfect company. So the real issue is figuring out what we need to do better and what we want to do better, and then being committed to making the changes that takes. And that's true in every industry, not just manufacturing. It's true in healthcare, it's true in government, it's true in education, it's true in financial services. There is no perfect company. So we all have the opportunity to get better if we choose to, and if we're willing to do the hard work that it takes.
Trey?
First, thanks to Clark and Rebecca and to you for moderating. It's been a fun conversation. My closing thought would be focus on the balanced approach. Successful organizations have tools and processes and templates that are part of what we call technical skills. They have the business acumen to have proper context around where they're going, so the people in the organization and their vendors and partners know what course corrections to make, and they have the interpersonal skills and the understanding of team dynamics and how change happens to be able to make that project succeed.
Great. Well, thanks everyone involved, and I think that we also ideally want to put the final thoughts out to whoever is watching. We'll be embedding this video, whether or not you're watching it on Barth's site or on other sites or simply on YouTube. Feel free to put in your final thoughts and continue the discussion. So thanks to everyone, and this has been a great discussion, and we look forward to it continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you.